For USCFootball.com, I'm Jack Smith, joined by Connor Morrissette for instant analysis from USC's Wednesday practice of Minnesota week. Connor, not going to beat around the bush at all today. What were your biggest practice observations?
Well, Jack, I have a few right here. Eddie Traplicki continues to just hit booming punts in practice, and we saw a returner have some trouble with one of them today, just like in the Wisconsin game, and we'll talk more about what he had to say after practice, but USC's punter is just becoming a weapon on special teams, and it looked like one today. Gino Quiñones, not a great day for him in the scout team period. As the backup center, he takes reps with the rest of the first-team offensive line. He had 2 high snaps and then immediately got pulled. Killian O'Connor went in to replace Quiñones at that point, and then they ran the rest of the drill smoothly. Jack, you pointed out to me some of the wide receivers were working on blocking, which can never do enough blocking as a wide receiver if you're not catching the ball. Carson Tabaracci had probably the catch of the viewing period. A ball was thrown behind him, and he snagged it out of the air. It's good to see he returned from a neck injury. Anthony Beavers was with the linebackers, which that looms even larger now because Rajon Davis is taking a red shirt. So if someone can't play like Eric Gentry this week against Minnesota, USC's down to Mason Cobb and Easton Mascarenas-Arnold in that starting top unit. If one of those guys can't play for whatever reason, then maybe Anthony Beavers will see some of him. D'Anton Lynn was with the linebackers, and they were working on dropping into coverage, which stood out to me because I just watched the Minnesota-Michigan game. Michigan beat Minnesota by 3 last week. In Minnesota, it's a lot of screen passes. It's a lot of short passes. They had 23 passes either behind the line of scrimmage or within 10 air yards. Against Wisconsin, USC only had 16 of those, so it's a much bigger part of the Minnesota offense, so it was cool to see the linebackers working on that. I think they're going to be asked to do a lot. That Minnesota running back, Darius Taylor, he's a pretty good pass-catching back. He had 10 catches for Minnesota against Michigan. Cool to see the linebackers working on stuff that they're going to see this week.
Yeah, Minnesota doesn't have the biggest wide receiver room, certainly, that USC will face. And that's kind of, I'm learning the theme with some of these Big Ten teams, and you look at the ones that USC's faced and haven't really been wowed by a talent on the outside. There are certainly some of them. You're not playing Oregon or Ohio State this year. They've got like probably five best in the conference outside of USC and some of these other schools. But I think that obviously a good sign for USC. The number one thing that stood out to me was the wide receivers blocking, because I think that we get asked about the screen game a lot, and we get asked about why are all these passes at the line of scrimmage getting called. Those have worked for USC in the past couple of years because they had absolute dogs on the outside as blockers. Taj Washington and Brendan Rice were phenomenal in the blocking game as receivers, and I don't think that this group quite yet has gotten that talent down, like that skill down. It's something that they're still learning. A pass in the flat can turn into a big play if you get it into the hands of your playmakers, if the other 2 guys on that side of the field are holding their blocks, and I think that's a big key for USC moving forward.
And that's something that I think we glossed over in the offseason, because these sophomore receivers, they're practicing pass catching going back to elementary school. You don't really practice blocking, especially at the college level, until you get to the college level. And so with these guys being so new, we saw Jacoby Lane have a fantastic game against Wisconsin, his best game as or I guess that would be up for debate because he had a great game against Louisville too, but career high 105 passing yards. But then the week before against Michigan, he misses the block, and Lake McCree gets his legs cut out from under him, and now he's out for a couple weeks. So Lane, he is drastically improving as a pass catcher every day, but it's good to see them working on blocking, because I think that's just something a lot of these guys haven't been able to work on much. It's not like you can work at blocking at the college level, at the high school level, and you can, of course, work on pass catching all the time. So I think that's been an adjustment that we've seen them make in real time, and that's obviously encouraging, especially what happened against Michigan. Those receivers know they need to block better, and that looks like it's been an emphasis.
After practice, we got to talk to D'Anton Lynn. Of course, some of the questions were about the second half adjustments, because USC's been so good at that under him so far this year, especially the last 2 weeks, including that second half shutout against Wisconsin. He kind of answered it the same way as he has before, saying it's not about the adjustments, really, it's all about the players, and credited them for coming out with the energy. But 2 of the guys that he mostly talked about, Jahdae Abasiri as well as Anthony Beavers, who you mentioned earlier, guys that are serving in reserve roles, but guys that he is confident in should they see the field a little bit more often.
I think Abasiri has a great opportunity, and Beavers, the jury's still out with him because we don't really know where he's going to play. He was with the linebackers today, and it seems like he's one guy not being available from playing there, but he also takes reps at safety, and Lynn talked about how he can play the Sam, the Will. They like him at safety. We've heard a lot of good things about him, but he just hasn't really played all that much. He did get in against Wisconsin at the end, I believe. One guy who did not get in at the end against Wisconsin, who I feel like actually probably will play pretty consistently going forward, is Jahdae Abasiri. Lynn's been straight up with us when we're asking about guys' availability. Last week he was asked who's going to play more He said Bryson Shaw and Zion Branch, they ended up playing more. Today I asked him about Abasiri straight up. Is he in your plans? Do you anticipate playing him more? And he said, yes, he's a guy we do want to see more. We think game reps will be really valuable for him. So it looks like he's going to break into that rotation, although he didn't against Wisconsin for whatever reason. So expect to see some of him going forward. I don't know exactly how it's going to play out. Of course, I can't see into the future, Jack, but to me it just seems like Abasiri has a role sort of built in right now with Barry Alexander leaving, where with Anthony Beavers, I don't exactly know where he is going to play unless there is another linebacker injury. I don't think there needs to be an injury for Abasiri to play is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and this is, as we mentioned yesterday on Instant Analysis, it's a homecoming week for Jahdae Abasiri. He was a one-time Minnesota commit. He flipped to come to USC. He's from Prior Lakes, Minnesota, so I'm sure he's chomping at the bit to get in this game. We also got to talk to a handful of players. One of them was the punter, Eddie Chaplitsky. He's been one of USC's best players this season, and it came after a year last year where he was pretty disappointing. Came over as an all Pac-12 player from Arizona State, was booming punts for the Sun Devils all year, had a slow year last year, and this year he already has more 50-yard punts than he did all of last season, so I got a chance to talk with him. He said the offseason for him wasn't different as it was coming from Arizona State, but feels more comfortable here in year two, worked really hard over the offseason. He credits some of the weight room gains that even those guys made alongside the team gaining 1,400 pounds, and just said that the number one thing that stands out is he is more confident this year, and you've really seen it. We see it in practice all the time, and I think we had a feel that he's better than the season he had last year, and he has really shown it this year as one of the best punters in the nation.
I wasn't in on that scrum, but hearing you say all that, I was going to respond by saying, yeah, he just looks a lot more confident, so that's great to hear him say it. It's clearly true. At practice, he just kind of watches over the special teams guys, the other punters, sometimes the other kickers. And it's not like I'm better than you look, but it's just kind of he's carrying himself with a little bit of a different energy than some of those other guys, and we've certainly seen that on the field. And like I said earlier, we do watch the punters when we are allowed into practice, and it just looks different coming off his foot. Sometimes the ball kind of knuckles, and I wouldn't want to return his punts. I know Wisconsin, they didn't have a good time returning some of his punts. I don't anticipate that changing anytime soon. He seems really locked in.
Yeah, he didn't take credit for the muff. I asked him, how much credit do you take when someone muffs a punt? And he said, not at all. Maybe it was just the wind or something like that. But he did give a lot of credit to Hank Pepper, the long snapper, for running down and recovering the fumble. I mentioned that it doesn't happen all the time, but he was there, right place, right time, and made a big play. I know you were in on the scrum for Gavin Meyer. There were a couple other players that talked, like Zion Branch, some of these other guys. Who stood out to you most after practice?
I asked Gavin Meyer what's it like playing for the number 11 team in the country, because coming from Wyoming, a smaller school, just this opportunity, and he started by saying we don't really pay attention to rankings, but I didn't really care about his take on the rankings. I just wanted to know what it's like to be at USC after coming from Wyoming, and how, like, the number 11 team in the nation, this defense is working. Meyer's playing a lot, just his situation. I wanted to hear about that, and he was really, really happy with it. He said this is, he really couldn't have dreamed of something like this happening to him, and he's in a really good spot. He's very happy. His whole family was at the last game against Wisconsin, and to see him start and to see him play, the conversations that he has with his family after the games, like being a small-town kid from Wisconsin, going to Wyoming, and now being at USC, his family's so proud of him, and it was really cool to hear him talk about those emotional moments after some of these games, and he just seems like a really great guy. I know all indications in the offseason were that he's done everything right, and he's been a real team player, and that really shone through to me today in that scrum. He's really happy to be a Trojan, and after a week where there was a defensive lineman who didn't seem all that happy to be at USC, that really stuck with me, how happy Meyer is to be here and how he does everything right.
Yeah, I asked him about dropping into coverage on the defense's final play of the day on a 4th and 10, and he kind of started cracking up. I was asking him roughly how many times have you done that before, and he said, really, I've never been asked to do that at the collegiate level. He really wanted to make a play on the football. Unfortunately, he went to the other side where his fellow defensive tackle Nate Clifton was there, and I asked Devin Tompkins if they made fun of Clifton at all for not picking off a ball that was kind of thrown right by his earlobe, and he said, oh yeah, we were joking with him about it. But Gavin Meyer, very happy-go-lucky. He's just, I think I would echo what you said, happy to be at USC, happy to be a Trojan, and just really enjoying the season that he's having and that the defense is having, and he won't say it, but he's a big part of it for USC so far.
Huge part of it, bigger than I think anyone could have possibly imagined. You look at the Pro Football Focus numbers of him when he transfers over, and it's like, what, this guy wasn't starting at Wyoming last year, and he's going to be this big piece of the USC defense. Credit to the USC recruiting staff, credit to the coaches, and credit to Gavin Meyer, because he's come in and been a heck of a lot better than I think anyone anticipated in the middle of that defense. He's been a stalwart in there, and he's played really well. A guy who you kind of like would think, oh, from Wyoming, how much of an impact can he have? He's been massive to this defense, like you said, Jack. So wanted to shout him out. And USC, sometimes you got to get a little bit lucky. He was a guy who entered the portal at the last second on the last day, ends up picking USC. I think the defense would look a lot different now, especially if you're down Bear Alexander, if he hadn't entered the portal. So credit to USC for being in on that, and even though it took a while, they got a defensive tackle at the last second. It's worked wonders.
Yeah, maybe shame on the coaching staff over at Wyoming for not giving him more of a chance. I mean, he's starting at USC and having a great year so far. There were a couple other jokes during the media period today. Mason Cobb saying, he's joked with the defensive line. I've got 2 picks. You guys don't really even have any sacks. A little bit of ribbing going on there. And then Zion Branch was, I thought, very formal. He said he's excited to have the opportunity. Didn't dive into anything too much. He's very professional, a lot like his brother. They say the right things, and he's excited to have a little bit more of a role in this defense hopefully going forward. And that's something that D'Anton Lynn talked about, just very physical play that he saw from him on Saturday. Is there anything else that we heard after practice that stood out to you?
Branch just looks a lot more confident than last season too, kind of like Eddie a little bit in that regard. I just think overall, Jack, talking to the defensive players and talking to Lynn today, they just seem to be in a really good spot. They're all confident. It's not just the punter. It's not just Zion Branch. That whole group is feeling really good. Gavin Meyer used the term, we're rolling. They see what we all see, which is a damn good defense right now, shutting out Wisconsin in that second half. D'Anton Lynn pushing all the right buttons, those second half adjustments. And it's not like the defense has really started slow in some of these games. Yes, they've allowed more points in first halves than in second halves, but I think when you talk about the slow starts, I'd pin that more on the offense a little bit. The defense could be better too, of course, but they're really doing a lot of really good things. They're a lot better than I expected, and it's awesome to see everyone acknowledge that. The vibes are good. People seem to be in good spirits, and that leads me to believe that I think they're going to play well against Minnesota. I think they're going to play well going forward. If everyone's healthy and they avoid some more injuries in the future, they're in a really good spot.
Yeah, I would agree. We'll see USC play next on the road against Minnesota this Saturday. We're both flying out Friday. Excited to knock another state off of a list I haven't been to yet. See the stadium for Minnesota. See USC play another one of these new Big Ten opponents. But that's all we've got for Instant Analysis today with Connor Morrissette. I'm Jack Smith. Thank you for watching Instant Analysis, and check out USCfootball.com for more.